This might be the new King of BBQ. It's juicy, it's tender, it's smoky, and it tastes freaking delicious.
Big thanks to Napoleon Grills for sponsoring this episode.
Of course, you had the holy trinity of barbecue: ribs, pulled pork, and brisket. But this might be the new holy grail of barbecue. And the reason that we needed that new holy grail is because of the current prices of brisket. Big stores have figured out that we like brisket a lot, and that's why they have been raising prices ever since they figured that out. If we switch to this cut, we get to enjoy it for a long time and have something delicious on our plate every time we cook barbecue. Let me show you what I'm talking about. I'm talking about this. This is a chuck roll, and from this chuck roll we cut what's called the chuck steak. This is what butchers call a technical cut or a primary cut. It means it's the cut they get delivered from their supplier, and then they cut the steaks out of them themselves. And of course, if you do the butcher's work for them, you're going to save some money. And in this case, it's not that hard. You see, this is a whole chuck roll. In Dutch, we call it a shoulder. It's also called a shoulder clout, and you can easily identify the chuck steak because it kind of resembles a ribeye. And then you can identify the piece that doesn't belong to the chuck steak, which is this top part here, and on the other side it's this part right here. So all we need to do is cut that off, and we're going to end up with delicious chuck steaks. Take a long sharp knife, and these pieces you're going to save for later. Now this is what is called a chuck roast. Of course, then you still need to cut it into chuck steaks. And since we're doing proper barbecue, we're going to need a little bit of volume in our steaks. So my suggestion is just take 4 fingers, put them on your steak, and that is where you're going to make your cut. Now on the ribeye side of this roast, you're going to get your best cut. Look at that. That is an absolute brilliant chuck steak. I'm going to get another steak out of this. Look at that. What a beauty. Towards the end, your chuck steak is going to become a little less tender. But the cool thing is that if we cut them into chuck steaks and cook them barbecue style, then you're going to end up with tender meat anyway. So how tough it is doesn't really matter, as long as there's enough intramuscular fat to make it juicy and tender. 4 beautiful chuck steaks out of this chuck roll shoulder cloth. Now you might be wondering, well, then you end up with this as a side product. Don't worry about it, because this is perfect for your burgers. If you grind this up, you're going to have the perfect burger meat. And you have to remember, this comes from the bull of our neighbor, which we together with Hemel ter Wele slaughtered and cut up ourselves. For today, 2 chuck steaks is going to be more than enough for what we're going to do. So I'm going to vacuum these 2 other steaks and throw them in my freezer for a later date. And I'm going to grind up the rest of the meat for burgers later on. The chuck steaks are a bit odd in shape, but you can still throw them on the barbecue like this. However, if you tie them up with a little bit of butcher's twine, they're going to look a lot better. And now it's very convenient that you made them a little thicker so they have some body. All you need to do is just get your butcher's twine, tie it up so you get a nice bit of volume. Any old nut will do the job, don't worry about it, as long as it is secure. And now you can see the difference between the two, like a tied up version and another tied up version. It just makes things look a little cleaner. Of course, I'm going to put some seasoning on. I'm going to start with a little PITMASTERX Texas barbecue seasoning, which is the perfect combination of flavor and meat. And that's going to be my base layer. Of course, I'm going to season top, bottom, and the sides. Follow that up with a little bit of PITMASTERX classic seasoning for color. There's some paprika powder in there that's going to give us a lot of color, but it's also going to bring us the next level flavor. Now, I'm not going to use a binder in this case because I'm going to finish it with a sauce. Binder is not the combination that I'm looking for today with this cut. Of course, you can do it if you want. Basic rule is binder, no sauce, because with a binder you're trying to build up a crust, and with a sauce you're basically replacing that crust with a layer of sauce. There we go, that looks beautiful. Let's get this stuff from the board. And that is a beautiful cut for barbecue. Big, thick steaks. These are about 1.5 kilograms a piece, and they're going to be perfect at your next barbecue party. Let's fire up the grill. I'm going to place in 2 bricks, creating a direct zone and an indirect zone. Put in some charcoal, a fire starter, light it up, and once it's lit, I'm gonna put on these coconut briquettes, which burn consistently for a long time. Of course, I'm gonna place on some smoke wood and dial in the temperature to 120 degrees Celsius. Once it's up to temperature, I'm gonna put in some thermometer probes, making sure that I got the core temperature of the meat absolutely perfect. So this can now go into the barbecue, of course, over indirect heat. Look at that smoke starting off strong. Because in the beginning, this piece of meat is going to pick up the most smoke flavor. All right, let's close the lid. I'll let the barbecue do its job. In the meantime, I'm going to show you how to make the easiest barbecue sauce to go with the chuck steak. First thing that you're going to need is some chipotle flakes. It's basically like chili flakes, but smoked. And of course they come from another pepper, but the idea is the same thing, except for this is going to make your barbecue taste so freaking amazing. I'm going to need about 3 tablespoons of that into this jar. Now mind you, that's going to be a little bit spicy. If you like it less spicy, just put 1 tablespoon in. At the moment, these are dry chipotle flakes. I want to bring them back alive with a little bit of whiskey. Well, that's going to be the ultimate combination. I'm just going to soak them in a 1/4 cup of whiskey. If you mind having alcohol in your sauce, just burn it off, heat up the sauce afterwards if you mix it together, and then all of the alcohol is gone. And now we've got a chipotle infused whiskey. The next ingredient to add is vinegar. That's the base of all barbecue sauces. I'm going to use about 1/2 cup of vinegar. Of course, I got to balance that back out with sweetness, so I'm also going to add 1/2 cup of syrup. In this case, I'm using molasses. You can also use a dark brown sugar, but the benefit of using molasses is that you don't have to let it melt. One more ingredient is going to be ketchup. That's also going to be a 1/4 cup. If you don't add Worcestershire sauce to your barbecue sauce, it's not going to be a real barbecue sauce. Because I'm making so much, I'm going to add 2 tablespoons. And for a little bit more texture, I'm going to add 2 teaspoons of coarse mustard, 2 teaspoons of the PITMASTERX Texas seasoning, and 2 teaspoons of the PITMASTERX Classic seasoning. And of course you're going to shake it, perform a taste test, just to make sure you did a good job. It's got a nice shine to it. Woo! It's intense spicy, it's sweet, but it's got that tang to it. It's going to fit perfectly together with beef. If you want to store this for a long time, make sure you boil this, and then you can store this easily up to 6 months. It's been an hour and a half since we put the chuck steaks on, so let's go and have a look. They look absolutely fantastic. You can see that they picked up a lot of smoke flavor because they got that mahogany red color, and they build up a bark. You can choose to keep them on the barbecue without wrapping them, developing that bark even further, but you're also going to lose some moisture. And so that's why I choose to wrap them up. If you want to wrap a brisket in an offset smoker, you wrap it in butcher's paper. If you want to cook chuck steaks in your kettle grill, you wrap it in aluminum foil. The reason that there's a difference is because of the radiation heat. In a kettle grill, radiation heat is much more common than convection heat. Whereas in an offset smoker, convection heat is going to be your worst enemy of drying out. So make sure you understand the difference between the two before you make your choice with what you wrap. And if you're in doubt, always perform a test to find out which one works the best. Now I'm going to add nothing other than our barbecue sauce for just a little bit of flavor and a little bit of moisture. Look at that. That already looks fantastic. And all I need to do now is just do a simple wrap like that. And now this can go back on the barbecue. Of course, the same thing goes for the other chuck steak. Of course, I'm going to stick the thermometers back in so I can keep track of the temperature. And now we're going for the home stretch. We need to take that chuck steak up to a 92 degrees Celsius core temperature, or even a little bit higher. And to do that, I'm going to raise up the temperature just a little bit in the barbecue. I'm going to set it to 140 degrees Celsius. And I'm going to do that by opening the bottom vent just a little bit more. I just got the notification from the thermometer that the chuck steaks are done. Ta-da! But in reality, we're not done yet because we still have some steps in the process. Ooh, that looks good. Look at that. That is a beautiful thing. Sitting nicely in its juices, still a little bit tense. And with the desired temperature reached, I'm going to put it back on the barbecue. Of course, the next one is going to go on the barbecue too. Close the lid and make sure you capture what you can of those juices. While the chuck steaks are drying up on the outside, I'm gonna brush on a little bit of our chipotle whiskey barbecue sauce, giving it that beautiful shine that's just gonna make this food pop and transform it into something special. Delicious, good looking barbecue. After about 5 minutes, take it off the barbecue. Now, of course, we're gonna let this rest. I'm gonna give it at least 10 minutes. So without further ado, let's slice into this. So the rope, yes, it's letting go. Let's get a slice, and let's do a slice straight away. Oh, that is one tasty, juicy slice of meat. I'm gonna dip it in some of that gravy that we captured. And now look at it. Perfect bite. It's tender, it's juicy, and above all, it's barbecue. You just gotta love chuck steak. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Give chuck steak a try. I recommend it. And if you want to go all in, just get that big chuck roll or shoulder cloth and do it yourself. So that way you're gonna get it even cheaper and better. See you guys in the next one. Cheers.